Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast, out there in the Pacific Ocean, on Hawaii and Northern Mariana Islands, America Samoa. Thanks for joining. Some of you are coming in at 3 a.m. You might be watching the replay. And good afternoon to those of you on the West Coast, on the East Coast where I'm at. It's nice and sunny out there. Today is the 16th. It is my wife Nancy's birthday, and I'm spending this with you, and then I'm going to go spend it with her and see how well the boys and I can sit there and actually do a birthday celebration. So it's a fun day. I'm in a good mood. I'm excited to talk about the top 5 traits for successful business relationships in the federal market, and I'm hoping you are too. I did want to sit there and before we get started, just give a quick update on something I saw today, and I'll put this out on LinkedIn and share it more. But I did see the State Department, they put out their forecast for 2023, and it's got all sorts of good information in there. And a couple of favorite things that I like about it. One is they have a ton of people's names, numbers, and email addresses. And these people appear to be like cores, maybe program office, but people who are a lot closer, it seems, to the work than perhaps a small business specialist or contracting officers. Not that they're bad people. Some of my closest friends are small business specialists. But it also has, telling you whether it's going to be an 8A set aside or, how it was competed before. And the last thing I really like about it, I think there was like 100 plus new opportunities. There's 600 or so opportunities, if I recall correctly, and about 100 of them are new competition. So if that's something you're interested in, check out the State Department. I'm sure you can find this on Anna Ehrman's post, by the way. I haven't talked about Anna Ehrman, but she's one of those people in the government contracting world that in LinkedIn, you should definitely be following with her. And by the way, if you're not following me on LinkedIn, connect with me. I'll connect with you if I find you and I see you and you're part of my world, because I love to have that connection. Okay, so if you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I am the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I'm excited to have you here for my daily LinkedIn Live federal sales training, where I teach processes and procedures, tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years myself as a small business owner in the federal market, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When you follow the process A to Z, you're going to have predictable results at the end. Predictable, repeatable results are the things that I like, and I think that you would like as well. And that's why we do this training day after day, is because we really want to keep giving you tips and procedures that you can use to try to achieve the success that you've set for your success metrics you've set for yourself. Before we get started, do me a favor. In the chat, a lot of you guys are doing this already, but go ahead and put your company name and your core competency, 2 or 3 words in there that tell me about your company. Help me, help buyers, help the people in the community, your peers around the government contracting world. Help us remember who you are. And the easiest way to do that is by putting 2 or 3 words. If you're on LinkedIn, by the way, don't forget that you can put in at, GovCon Chamber, for example. If you put in at your company name, then it'll bring up your company page. So as long as you're putting your company name in, you might as well tag it into LinkedIn if you can do that, so that people might follow your company page or learn more about your organization. Okay, and then the last thing is, as we go through today's training, I'm going to be asking you to put things into the chat. I'm going to say, hey, if you're tracking on what I'm saying, put something in the chat. Do me a favor, engage. It first off helps me just be able to track that you're hearing what I'm saying and that it's ringing true to you. And then also it's reinforcing what I'm trying to teach to each of the other people in the community along with you, right? If you see something, like if I say put I'm responsible into the chat, then a lot of us doing that, that's reinforcing the message out there. And by the way, just because I'm teaching does not mean that I'm not also learning what I'm talking about, right? I have a lot of years experience. I know what I'm talking about. But when you keep teaching it, you just keep getting better at understanding how you can communicate it to others and how you're actually implementing it. So some of these traits I'm about to talk to you about are the very same ones that I put in front of me as, hey, in 2023, you know what? I want to see if I can incrementally get better at these skills, these traits. And it reminds me of Benjamin Franklin. I don't know if you've ever tracked on Benjamin Franklin had these 13 habits, 13 rules that he tried to live by. And I'm butchering the story a teeny bit, but basically every week he would take a different one and work on that. And so these 13 rules throughout the year and throughout the years, he would just constantly work on it. Skills and habits, traits, you're not done, right? We don't just learn it, we're done. We learn it, we begin to figure it out, and then we get better and better and better at it. And that's what I want for you, and it's certainly what I want for myself. So I'm excited to talk about today's topic. Okay, so in this lesson, in this training, we're going to be talking about the top 5 traits for successful business relationships in the federal market in particular, right? And those 5 traits that I'm going to talk about today are thinking win-win, being self-motivated, being process-driven, having commitment and being reliable, right? And then taking responsibility. So those 5 are what we're going to talk about. I know that you know relationships are vital to success, to your success. And today we're going to talk about, are you really tracking on the top ones? Are you doing what you can to improve or strengthen your skills around these traits, right? Are you turning them into strengths? So this is going to be a fire hose of traffic coming at you, but every single one of them has got really good tips, in my opinion, on how to help you with these relationships. Apparently, it's going to be a heavy water day. Okay, so let's start with Think Win-Win. If you haven't seen this book before, I hold it up a lot, and it's 7 Habits for Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. He wrote this book long time ago, but the first time I read it was back in 97, right? I don't know if I was out of the Army or just getting out of the Army, but all of us were reading it back then. It became, one of those books like, this is the best business book. But it turns out I loved it the whole time, that I read it year after year. Every single year I read this again. But Stephen Covey's 4th habit in there is think win-win. And win-win is about making sure that when you go into a business relationship in the federal market, you want to make sure that both the other party, the other person, the other company, and you are winning. And let me give you the options that are not win-win, and then I'm going to come back to win-win. So there's other options that you can have. You can have win-win. You can have win-lose, where the other people lose, but you win. You can have win-lose, where you lose, but they win, or you can have lose-lose. I don't think any of us ever get ourselves into a lose-lose relationship, right? Once we're starting to get in there, we tend to avoid lose-lose, right? And sometimes we're avoiding because we're basically good at building relationships, even if we need to learn some skills. We're basically pretty good at making sure that they're not losing and we're winning, right? We're generally pretty observant, and I would say that you tend to probably avoid that. The part that I really want to pay attention to is the lose-win for a second. Sometimes we go in and tell me if you're guilty of this, or just think about this, or whether you're guilty of doing this to yourself, of going into a relationship with a lose-win attitude. I want to help them get what they want. I want to make sure that they understand our value to them, all that kind of stuff, but we don't think about ourselves. Well, that's not a good relationship. A relationship should be win-win. I get what I want, and you get what you want, without any kind of negative feedback in there or negative results of that, right? There's a balance in there. If there's certain things that we both are trying to achieve as in particular, buyer-seller relationship or teaming partner relationship, we can find a win-win scenario. And I want you to really think about being in that scenario, never being in that lose-win, because that's the area I find people have challenges. Here's an example that I just ran into this week with a customer that I thought was so perfect on a win-win example that I wanted to share today. And so this customer, I had made an introduction, and I said, this company, and I'm just trying to use some casual, let's just say this company is really good at Oracle development, right? And I made this referral to this other company who's actually doing pretty well, and they've got contract vehicles. And she got back to me afterwards and said, hey, yeah, we talked. I hadn't realized how new this company that does Oracle is. They're brand new in the government space. It's like, yeah, they have no experience, but what they bring is a complete subject matter expertise that she might be able to use, my customer might be able to use. And she said, yeah, that's what we saw. And so what I agreed to do is help them get on a contract vehicle and to be able to see some opportunities. And they could bring their expertise to help us go after maybe Oracle opportunities that we couldn't go after before. And so both of them, even though they weren't on equal playing grounds, perhaps on experience or even skill sets, right? They had different, their scales were balanced differently depending on whether you're looking at experience or whether you're looking at knowledge, let's say. But they found this win-win scenario about, hey, here's how we can help. And they're seeing the longer term relationship. Let's keep working together. Let's see areas that we can identify that perhaps we can pursue together. But neither one of them thought of just, hey, I'm here if I can, right? The person with the Oracle experience didn't just say, here's my skills, use it how you can. No, my customer was like, no, let me get you into the contract vehicle so you can start getting a broader sense of awareness. So the last thing I want to just say about win-win is keep it in your head that a good way to think about win-win is to give without expectation, right? When you go into an environment, if you're giving without expectation, giving introductions and agency knowledge that you might have, agency insight, sometimes we tend to be close hold. But if you give without expectations, that'll come back. But when you give without expectations, and I talk about giver's gain, hey, if you give enough, it'll come back to you. But don't let that be a reactive activity. Make sure you're also paying attention to, well, how can they help you? You need to be able to communicate that to them so that you are both moving forward. Don't just give so much without expectation that you give to your detriment, that you're not actually building a relationship, because eventually that relationship will be no good for the other person that you're also giving stuff to. So hopefully that makes sense. If it did, put win-win into the chat. And I want to move to the second habit and kind of pick up the speed a little bit here. The second trait for successful business relationships in the federal market is being self-motivated. And here, what I mean about self-motivated is when you show up to a meeting, for example, you're there. You're proactive. You're present in that meeting. No one has to motivate you, right? Even here, some of you might be getting energy from me because I bring a lot of energy to the training, but really you should be motivating yourselves. No one else should be able to motivate you so much, right? I'm not a motivational speaker. What I hope to give you is skills and tips for success. And if you bring that energy and motivation and learn the skills, then you will achieve this stuff. And so when you go into a business relationship with a teaming partner or even a customer, coming in motivated, self-motivated could begin with something as straightforward as setting and achieving metrics. You're setting and achieving metrics that you're going to achieve in this relationship or in this meeting, and you're measuring yourself on a regular basis saying, am I moving this forward? Am I proactively driving this relationship forward compared to, am I just showing up to a meeting and say, well, what do you got? What are we doing? And I've been in those meetings and they are depressing at best, right? I'm like, I don't get it. Why are we having a meeting if I'm the only one, here doing something? But if you're self-motivated and you're driven, then that'll be visible. It'll be visible in you doing the hard things, perhaps, that move the needle forward. And when I say hard, I mean perhaps doing a lot of extra research or actually making calls, right? Have you ever been in a relationship, a teaming relationship, where maybe it feels like you're the one calling the customer in the program office and trying to dig down, and the other person's showing up saying, hey, I saw on GovWin. GovWin is just a database, great database, but it's just a database. But in a relationship where you're trying to drive opportunities forward, I need you to be self-motivated, right? In the relationships, you want to be self-motivated. Last kind of tip around this is a way to show that you're self-motivated to yourself, right? A way to show yourself that you're self-motivated is to go the extra mile, right? To really drive forward. I was teaching my sons, in case you don't know this, I've got two 8-year-old boys, twin boys, and I was teaching them about doing pull-ups. They were doing some pull-ups, and they were hanging on the bar, and Gabe was talking about how, my hands are burning. I'm like, so just keep going. I said, what's happening? And he's on the bar and he's trying to do whatever he's doing. And all I did was talk to him. And I said, look, what's happening is your brain is getting some signals that your hand is hurting, and your brain is thinking, well, maybe we should stop. Your heart is maybe we should stop. But the reality is you don't stop, right? I learned this in the Army a long time ago. Your body will quit when your body's done. But if your mind quits before your body, then you're giving up too early. And if you come into a relationship, you want to kind of do that same thing, right? Go the extra mile, do the extra activity that's needed for you to be able to get that relationship moving forward. Or if you guys have got an opportunity you're chasing, that you can move that opportunity forward. And I'm going to talk in a minute about another way of looking at that. But if you understand that in relationships, we don't want to have to motivate you to be active, right? I don't mind being here for you, but in relationships, your business relationships, they should not expect to have to give you motivation. You're bringing motivation, your own motivation. You're self-motivated. If you get that, put in the chat, I'm motivated. I'm self-motivated, excuse me. Put in, I'm self-motivated into the chat. While you do that, water break. Let me move on to trait 3 of successful business relationships in the federal market. And this is process driven. And I've seen this before and talked about it a lot, but it wasn't until I heard a friend of mine, a customer, but a friend of mine talking about how they were a little frustrated that when they would meet some businesses, and they didn't even have to necessarily be small businesses under 5 million or something, but they would just meet with different level businesses, and they're not process driven. Process driven means you're following a process, right? And we'll come back to that in a second. And so the key is, are you winging it when you go into relationships? Are you winging it when you're doing certain activity back in your company? And that, if you are, that's reactionary, where something happens and you're just doing it. They call it ad hoc or on the fly, right? Compared to, are you following a clearly set, defined set of steps? That's a process. That's a procedure. Step by step by step, we're doing this. And that's a proactive approach, right? And so process driven isn't just about you individually doing that, but also think about your company. Is your company a process driven organization? I'll give you a story exactly going into this is that, so my customer was running into businesses that they're meeting. And one of the things he was noticing is how much they were struggling with just simple tasks, like getting a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA turned around, right? We said we're going to do it, and then it would take like days or even a couple of weeks to get it turned around. Well, there clearly is a problem with the process. If just getting an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, which basically is a boilerplate document, to get that turned around, and inside, when he talks to these companies, they're like, oh yeah, it's going to this person, but it has to go here. Well, that's not process driven. And when people look at that with something as simple as an NDA, or maybe how you're doing meeting minutes or action items, when they see it there, it causes us concern farther down line by, well, what are your processes going to be around proposal writing and data calls? What are your processes going to be around being a prime contractor to us or a subcontractor to us? And so a good trait to have is being process driven, right? Process driven organization and people, you're able to see, like I said at the beginning of this training, repeatable, predictable results. We want that in making money, but we also just want it in the day-to-day activities. Another example of process driven is, do you use a call plan before you have a meeting with a teaming partner, meeting with a buyer? If you use a call plan, that's process driven, because you're setting an objective for that meeting. That's what I want to get accomplished. You're writing down questions ahead of time instead of just winging it when you go in. When you write them down, that means you had to have researched or prepared, right? And that other party, customer or teammate, they're going to love it. They're going to really appreciate it. And that's a successful trait, right, of a business relationship in the federal market. So if you understand that about being process driven, write down in the chat, I'm process driven. Put I'm process driven in the chat. Yes, Russ, I'm self-motivated to drink water. Okay, do me really quick before I continue, I just wanted to stop and thank our sustaining members who help make this training possible and everything else that we do. And I want to invite you to become a sustaining member today. We provide hundreds of trainings, step-by-step roadmaps, webinars, and networking opportunities like this to you. But the GovCon Chamber of Commerce is not government funded. And I'm definitely not Jeff Bezos, right? It's just me, it's my team, and it's you. And if you're getting value, then please consider becoming a sustaining member today. Okay, let's move to step 4, trait 4 for successful business relationships in the federal market. And this one is about having commitment and being reliable. There's so many ways I wanted to try to fit into here, attention to detail. It's all about, but this commitment to the relationship. I'm showing up, I'm going to do what it takes. And so an example of having commitment or being reliable to the other person, the other party, is just showing up prepared to the meetings that you have with them, right? Are you doing the homework necessary to go into a meeting? If you're talking with a buyer, have you read their strategic documents? I just talked about the forecast of the State Department. If you call somebody at the State Department that you know, are you reading that first and then talking to them? If you're doing a teaming partner activity, right? Are you going and trying to research opportunities that you might be talking about, getting updates and coming in? Are you doing your homework before a meeting? And then in the meeting, are you coming with an agenda? I talked about a call plan, right? That's basically the agenda. But are you coming into a meeting prepared with things like an agenda so that you can say, hey, purpose of today's meeting is this. Do you agree? Okay, cool. Then I got these kind of questions I'd like to talk about. I love to say, I've got this I'd like to talk about. Does that sound fine? And what else do you want to add to it? People generally appreciate that because now we have an organized meeting. We're showing up prepared to the meeting. Another thing that you can think about as it relates to being or having commitment and being reliable is that you complete action items. So when you go into a meeting and you're talking to teammates or buyers, that you do the action items quickly and without reminder. So without reminder, that means the other person shouldn't go, hey, did you get that action item done? Hey, did you get that action item done? There should be an action item defined with a due date, right? And you can think about this as data calls if you're writing proposals together, or information you're going to gather if you're chasing opportunities together, whatever it is. If you have an action item, no one should have to remind you to get it done, which goes to my first tip: do it quickly. Inside of my own organization, what we keep realizing is that because we talk to so many people and work with so many people, that if we're in a meeting, we have action items, if we let it go more than a day or two before we complete them from the meeting, all sorts of distractions begin to interfere with our ability to get to it as smoothly, let's say. And so we're really committing ourselves to getting action items done in the very same day or the next day at the latest, so it's fresh in our mind, and also we can get it back to the other people and say, hey, we did our part. When you get yours done is up to you, right? Go watch Neil's training on trades. But we did our part. So the other people go, this is awesome. These guys are reliable when I work with them. That means a lot in relationships going forward, is just doing what you say you're going to do. And the last thing I wanted to say was committing to giving 100%. If you've ever heard that line about giving, give 110%, that doesn't even make sense to me. I've said it myself for years, but it doesn't make sense at all. I can't give 100%, 110%. I can only give 100%. And if I can give 110%, it means I wasn't giving 100%, right? Because 100% is done. And don't get me started on grades that are higher than 4.0. But anyways, giving 100% is really important to a relationship. Every single time you want to show up and give 110%. And the reason that I like this is if both parties are giving 100%. And I was talking to Gus. If you don't know Gus, my colleague, who's always in the chat, kind of helping us in there, engaging on the community and helping me prepare these trainings. He and I were having a conversation about, even in our own efforts, we want to give 100% each. That way, if one of us shows up 50%, right? For whatever reason, you're just showing up at 50% level, you got too much on your plate or you're sick. Well, you too are still giving 150% effort into the organization. And I love how I just said no 110, but we can give 150. But I think you get what I'm saying, is that if everybody's giving 100%, then on the days where somebody isn't really showing up as strongly, you're still putting a lot of effort in, compared to everybody starting with the idea of giving 50-50. That's not a success. And so you want to have commitment in a relationship. And when you do, you will be reliable. And that's really important. So put "I'm reliable" into the chat if that's who you are or that's who you want to be. Put "I'm reliable." And if you're not reliable, don't put anything in the chat. No, that was unfair. Some of you were driving. Okay, so the last trait for successful business relationships in the federal market is taking responsibility. And this is one of my favorite ones. It's one I constantly work on myself. And if you've been in a lot of our trainings, we've touched on this before because we love it, right? So let's talk about taking responsibility in a relationship. One of the first things is, don't play the blame game, right? Don't look around and go, oh, whatever is happening that I don't like or that's not going good is somebody else's fault. I started the GovCon chamber actually under the name of HubZone chamber back in 2018. And then I changed it a year later into the GovCon chamber. But when I started it, it was because I was focused on helping HubZone companies improve the results. They were never getting the numbers they were trying to hit. There wasn't enough set-asides, et cetera. And one of the things that I said when I started it is, I am not blaming Congress. They've got an act, the president, the Congress, they've set laws in place that say certain money goes to small businesses, hub zones, whatever. I'm not blaming the SBA. They've got a hub zone program. I'm not blaming contracting officers and the in the agencies because they're setting goals. Mostly I'm not blaming them because I can't change them. But I looked at the small businesses and I said, let's take responsibility. Let's take full responsibility for why the hub zone program is not moving forward the way we want. And one of the first things we did was really address our visibility and showing up. Two examples is we made sure our DSBS profiles were good so that people could see, hey, here's a hub zone with a lot of experience. And the other thing is we showed up at the sources sought in RFIs. In this year, when we were doing the hub zone activity and doing daily set-asides, chasing opportunities, we were able to get 20, 30, up to 100 hub zone companies to respond to sources sought. And when that happened, the contracting officers were saying, well, shoot, it looks like we're going to get hub zones who can do this. And so they began to set it aside. But what we had was this mind shift of stop blaming everybody else for why the hub zone program wasn't working. And we took responsibility as individual hub zone businesses. And it's the same thing that you want to bring into a relationship. Don't blame the other person for anything. Look at yourself and go, what can I do? Another thing that you can do on taking responsibility here is have a go-getter mentality, right? So when you show up to your meetings, when you're showing up to these relationships you want to build, have a go-getter mentality. That means you're going to, in New York in particular, there was this whole line about see something, say something. But if I spin it a little bit, I say see something, do something. I tell my kids, if you're walking around the house and there's something's a mess, you see something, do something. Don't walk by it. Now, that's a lifelong pursuit with them and me, but that's the idea, right? If I see shoes, let me go put them in the shoebox. Well, if you see something in your relationship that needs to get done, hey, we needed to update this, from the forecast, or we talked to somebody, we need to provide information. If you see something that could be done in your business relationship, just do it. Don't wait to get credit. Don't wait to have somebody else do it. Don't blame it. Don't say it's your responsibility. Just take control. If you take responsibility, and I don't ever mean blame, but if you take responsibility and you say, if things are not going the way I want in this relationship, I'm going to take responsibility. And when I take responsibility, I'm able to take control, right? I'm able to take control of the situation, saying, if something is not getting done and it's John's fault, I'm going to wait all day long until John finally comes to a realization and does it before my life gets better, before I start seeing the things that I'd like. Compared to if I sit there and say, you know what, it's not getting done. Yeah, of course, maybe John should have done it, but I'm going to take responsibility because I equally could have helped John get this done. I'm going to take responsibility and I'm going to get it taken care of, right? And when you do that, you just get past whatever wasn't getting done. You are driving that relationship forward. John actually will probably look in and go, oh, thank God. I really appreciate you doing that, Molly, right? And so you're able to move it forward, but you have to take responsibility. And when you do, it'll give you control. So if you're following what I'm saying there, do me a favor and put I'm responsible into the chat. Okay, so in this training, we talked about the traits for successful relationships. Here's my advice to you walking away from today. I gave you 5, right? And my advice for you is just pick one of them and try to improve in that area over the next week or so, right? I'm going to do that myself, right? As I look at this stuff, I do a pretty good job at taking responsibility. But I think I'm going to pick number 3, which is be process driven, because as much as I'm a process guy, there are some things that I don't have the process down well enough, for example, to be able to communicate back to you. So I'm going to work on that next 7-10 days. And so between now and the next Friday, I want to work on becoming even maybe a little bit more process driven, that I can improve the relationships I have with you and maybe with my customers, et cetera. If you found value in today's training, do me a favor, thank us in chat. We love it. We really appreciate seeing that. Lets us know that you appreciate what we're doing for you. Remember, government contracting is not a secret. It is just a process. Part of the process is celebrating my wife's birthday, and that's exactly where I'm going to go. So I'll see you in the next training.